Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Diane Mueller, who's the founder of Femme Meets Fortune. Diane, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm really excited about our conversation.
Yeah, me too. I want to hear all about what you do, how you do it, and who you do it with. And I assume that you have a story and a background. So I always love to start off with, give us a little bit of your entrepreneurial journey to this point in your career.
Yeah, thanks. So the story I like to start with is the story I start with my rice and beans year. So that's when I got out of school and I was, entrepreneur at heart. I was going to start a business and I had $0 and poor debt and debt collectors, sometimes a dozen of them calling me every day. So it was the rice and beans year based upon that was the focus of my diet because I could not afford anything because I thought my lights were going to be turned off. So that was kind of how I got started. And one of the smartest things I did in the beginning was, even though I had to do part-time jobs to get things up and going, what I was really careful about, it was I wasn't doing part-time jobs based upon just bringing in dollars so I could keep my lights on. I was doing part-time jobs that were also all part of my lead flow. So it's I found, say, teaching classes, right? Well, I was teaching classes where it was on topics of the people in my classes could actually be my clients. Right. So it's very, very, strategic in the way I moved through things. And that went on. I got out of the rice and beans here. I got to a point where, according to some stats, my first business grew to the top 4% of small businesses in the United States. So that's really exciting. So I sold that. I went through all the journeys that go through with business valuation and selling and getting acquisition ready and all that kind of stuff, and sold that business. And now officially have 3 more businesses that are all running successfully and that sort of thing. So that's been kind of the overarching physical journey. But the other interesting thing that I have found, and this will lead into some of our other conversations, really comes down to the psychological journey, because I feel like part of being an entrepreneur really is yes, there's the physical things. Yes, there's the things that we need to know so people can find us, so we can make money, so we can do the things that we love in the world. But there's also that whole psychological component of things, of how the mind works when things get really hard, how the mind works when we get up and it's another day and there's not money coming into the bank account and it feels like you're working harder than all of your friends and making less money. So there was also a huge amount of psychological components beyond just the physical stuff that really got me out of the rice and beans.
You bring up a huge point, and we could probably spend about 4 hours on that one, mindset point alone, because you need to begin with the end in mind, as we know from Stephen Covey, and kind of know where you're headed. So that kind of guides your steps. But then there's times that you have to do the stuff. You got to, roll up the sleeves and grind for a while, like in the rice and beans phase, right? So everyone's going to have that phase, but you got to make sure you're grinding the right way, in the right direction, or else you're just, chugging right along. And then you come up for air one day and go, ooh, I'm 4 miles out of the wrong direction. So yes, your mindset, once you've got your directions in the right way, now you start grinding. And then during that work period of a year, 2, 3 years, whatever that time frame is, because we know it's not overnight, what if and when there comes a hiccup, like a delay, because we know that it's not a hockey stick all the time, or rarely. So when you work with your clients, what is the first thing that you are preparing them on in having to polish up that mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that I really like people to understand is when it comes to mindset, and when it comes to business, true, my personal belief in philosophy is really that as females and males actually approach business and do better when they approach business through their unique makeup. And, I can say this because I do have a background as a doctor. I've gone to naturopathic medical school. I have 2 doctorate degrees. And so I've studied the body quite extensively. And what's really interesting is like the way testosterone acts on the brain is testosterone makes the brain super duper focused, right? This is like, and like you'll hear like couples kind of talk about this in their relationships where it's like, oh, woman leaves a trash can by the back door for the man to take out on his way to work. And like man walks by the trash can or the trash, doesn't see it. And woman's like, why did you not take this out? And like the testosterone in the male brain really works in this way where it's like super, super, super focused, right? So it's like, it's not that the trash can wasn't seen, it's that the trash can wasn't an actionable step. And some of this too, I get from the work of Allison Armstrong. So if anybody's interested in what I'm saying, it's another great resource for you. But the female brain works very, very differently. The female brain and the way that hormones actually play on the female brain is that the female brain has a lot more diffuse awareness. So the female brain is like, walks into a room and it's like sees that the trash needs to be emptied, sees that the pillows are messy on the couch, sees that the dishes are in the sink, and they all almost like talk to the female at the same time. So, right. So it's like a lot. So the difference when it comes to like, okay, from a business standpoint, so take that trash, take that kitchen domestic example and apply it to business. Right. And so the way testosterone is for the masculine brain, it's really, really easy for the masculine brain as compared to the feminine brain. Again, making generalizations, but usually medically true, is that it's a lot easier for the masculine brain to say hyper focus on a project and see it to completion. With the female brain has a lot more to deal with from a diffuse awareness, but there's advantages and disadvantages. There's strengths and weaknesses of both of these types of systems. And so for females, because of the ability of the female brain to see all these things in this diffuse way, and it's harder for the woman to actually stay focused due to the chemical changes of her brain, that's where this whole conversation around pleasure comes up. And that's where I talk to so many of the females in the business and the women I coach around the need for having pleasure in life. And pleasure can be petting a dog. It can be having a hug. It can be intimacy. There's a lot of different ways of getting pleasure. But what essentially we're doing is we're really training the brain to release more of the hormone called oxytocin. And what oxytocin is, it causes the cortisol in our brain, the stress hormones in the brain. It causes that to actually fall. So it actually brings the woman's brain more into focus. So there's a lot we can say around like, commitment and strategies and all those things, but I actually find that, and some of those strategies I think that we see in some of these books oftentimes work really, really well for the masculine brain, but for the feminine brain, it's like, but I can't even focus to do those things. Yeah. So a lot of what I talk about in the beginning is like, yeah, we want to make our 90-day plan, right? We want to have a plan. We want to have a strategy, all of that. We want to understand our numbers. All of these basic business techniques are important. But where is that like 90-day pleasure plan and how is that integrated into the life? Because what I see is when we focus on that, we actually raise the oxytocin, we lower the cortisol, and a woman's brain that is in this diffuse awareness all of a sudden comes to focus. And it's like taking that time for the pleasure allows for the woman to then get so much more focused on getting them in the right mindset and getting those day-to-day activities done.
It makes me also wonder with that too, the binary dichotomy you just described, which is, maybe guys, they can see the big picture, but they're really better at or easier to focus on this one thing that's right in front of me, tunnel vision. And maybe the gals are like, okay, I see everything and everything's calling to me and I feel overwhelmed because I got to do all these things at once. And they're not able to allow themselves to focus on the first thing, then the second thing. And it's almost like, could it be as simple as gamification? Could it be as simple as, hey, when I get this first thing done, I'm going to go pet the dog or have that cup of tea so that you increase the pleasure and then you go check off the thing and then you get to the next one. But realizing that it's okay and that's normal to feel this way because it's like just how you're wired. Is that kind of part of how you are working with your clients to realize that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm thinking about when you're talking about this with gamification, all that, I'm thinking about Atomic Habits and James Clear's work. And his book also is connected to BJ Fogg's work on the research on tiny habits. And it's really looking at how, as humans, we actually put ourselves in a state where we are motivated to do things, right? So it's like when we're talking about gamification, what we're really talking about is motivation, essentially.
Yeah.
And so the studies on motivation and how we actually motivate ourselves as humans really do tell us that. They really do tell us that the brain is connected to commitment and to reward and to motivation, all based upon our dopamine pathways. And that's that reward. And that's why some of the gamification, apps on our, phones and computer programs out there use, unicorns running across the screen or bells or whistles or chimes or whatever it is, because it really is, we're actually playing with that dopamine center. So in some ways it's similar, in some ways it's different. I mean, similar because when we like the motivation is related to that dopamine center for sure. And so that actually helps with that motivation. But the secondary component really is oxytocin. Oxytocin isn't as much connected to like the gamification and the motivation, that commitment, but they both do different things. So we need that dopamine, that reward to help with that motivation and that commitment. And we need that oxytocin to actually bring down that stress hormone so that we can become more focused at the task at hand. So, taking a break and saying, okay, I'm going to go pet my dog. I'm going to go give my kid a hug. I'm going to go give my partner a hug, whatever is, and actually building that into our workday is a huge, kind of double edge or a double reward. It's like a, double bullseye, so to speak, because we get that advantage of we're doing these activities for a break that are actually helping us lower our cortisol level because they're raising oxytocin. But then we are also doing these things to actually trigger that dopamine reward center, which is our motivation to say, oh, I got rewarded. I did this thing. I got a reward, which trains the brain, as I think you're suggesting here on that commitment level to basically say, okay, I need to go back and get into my work. When I do this, look, I get rewarded. When I work, I get rewarded. And we want the brain to make that connection because that's how we commit on those really hard days when it's like, I've had months where I've lost tens of thousands of dollars in 1 month, in business. It's like everybody, I think that's been in business long enough, has those times. So when you have those bad times, it's like looking at being able to stay calm, being able to figure out what's going on, analyze things appropriately, and then, strategically plan to get back on board. And having that dopamine reward center really helps during those hard times.
Yeah, for sure. And also, when you were talking, it made me think of what about the concept of duplicating yourself through the, like having a VA. So what if you sat down, you're like, okay, here's all the things I need to do this week, today, and here's the ones that I must do, and here's the ones that I could load to someone else because they're admin type things. What is the benefit of kind of amplifying, getting that leverage?
Yeah, I call that the doppelganger effect in my work. So it's basically like, okay, how do we all create that duplicate, of ourselves? And the strategy I usually work with people in that is sitting down and writing. And just like, I always tell people to do this in boxes because I think it's easier for the brain to see it. So just write a bunch of boxes on the page. And then inside the boxes, what you do is write every single task you do in a different box. And I mean, every single task that's work related. So we could, do a separate one for like your personal life, but just keeping work life. So if you have an office, if you have a brick and mortar, and one of your jobs is taking out the trash at your brick and mortar, that goes in a box, right? So you want to think of everything. And this can be, easily a several hour project to do this well. And then you want to look and you can color code the boxes to say, okay, what are the boxes that are the hardest to hire out for, that are really the skill set that if you could only do these things and you could focus all of your time on these things, that would be the top areas to focus on business. And then you go through the other ones and then you can start color coding them like, okay, well, what are the ones that are the opposite? What are the ones that are the least important for you to be doing? And oftentimes the ones that are least important, not always, but oftentimes, sometimes those are the least expensive ones to hire out for. So then once you can kind of color code these by like least, medium and big importance, you can then begin to say, okay, well, what are the jobs that you need to get out of your life as fast as possible and hire for? And when you do this, in some ways, it's also helping you develop a job description because now you know the exact jobs that you need to get off your plate first. And sometimes it can be as simple as like, wow, if you can get these 3 jobs off of your plate, maybe that frees up, maybe it's just like 3 hours a week. But in the beginning, when we're juggling a bazillion balls, 3 hours can be a lot of time. And whether it's putting back into your business or actually being able to take a break to support your oxytocin and support your pleasure centers, which is going to help you work smarter, not harder, it frees up that time. So that's kind of the structure of how I help people, do that doppelganger effect. And of course, beyond there, then it's doing things that we know in business, like creating standard operating procedures. So there's like checklists and things that people need to do in order to, say, fulfill the job to your level or higher. But the initial step is really just like put everything in boxes and get really, really clear, because like people know they're doing a lot, but when they do this practice, I typically find that it's like this huge aha moment of like, wow, I didn't know I was doing that many things.
The thing I want to bring up when you were talking about that, it really made me think about that 3 hour, opportunity, and it might be 4 hours, 2 hours, but that 3 hour time that you reclaim for yourself by creating the doppelganger effect. I feel like we're tempted, if we're business owners, to fill that 3 hours with more stuff and more stuff. But if you know how you're wired and you then come into that 3 hours and go, I'm going to take an hour of that and go create some pleasure for myself, like pet the dog, drink the tea, take a walk, whatever the case is for you. And then those other 2 hours I freed up, now I'm going to go and, use the highest and best use of my time to be reaching out to clients, prospects, strategic alliances, whatever the thing that'll move the needle good enough. Do you find that some people are tempted to just refill that 3 hours with the more work, and then all of a sudden it becomes this vicious cycle of, I'm now overwhelmed again?
I find that majority of people end up in that vicious cycle. In fact, I think as humans, we are almost programmed to fall into these vicious, cycles. And that's where habits are really, that's why they're habits, right? Because habits are vicious cycles. And that's where I think another component of this, like, if you're finding yourself getting into those vicious cycles, really like a lot of people are motivated by, especially, business owners, a lot of people are motivated by data and success, right? So, there's ways of like, if you're finding yourself fall into these vicious cycles and you're like, gosh, I can't get out of this, and I really do feel better if I have this time. The way I have found to help people get out of this is through tracking. And what I would track in this is like, okay, so you have that 3 extra hours and you decide to fill it, and you decide to just like fly through your days and all of that. Like when you do that and you don't take a break, track things like, what is your actual progress? Are you actually getting more tasks done? Because oftentimes, even if we work more hours, when we don't do those pleasure activities, we're not as focused and we don't actually get more work done.
Yep.
And then track how you feel. If at the end of the day, like, this was a really interesting thing to consider. And I actually heard this first described by Alex Hermosi. He's you can find him on YouTube. He's a business owner, owns acquisition.com, and has a lot of great content out there. And the way he describes it is like, so many business owners will actually get to the point where they're working. And what are they working for? They're working for more free time and a better life to hang out with their, community, their family, their friends, these sorts of things. But they're doing it in a way where basically their lifestyle is set up because of the push. Their lifestyle is set up in a way they're actually getting less of those things and not more. Yeah. So, the other motivational standpoint is just to come back to really understanding what your why is. And if your why is to be able to have a life that you are hanging with your family, you're hanging with your friends, you're in this more relaxed state, then we want to be practicing that now on a daily basis, because what tends to happen because of this vicious cycle is we just keep going and going and going and going. And we can get to a point where we never actually reach that why on a personal level. Obviously, there's a why on a more, larger impact level, but on that personal level, we can get to the point where we get so busy, we actually are preventing ourselves from doing that thing. So coming back to like, what is our why? What is that motivation? What do we want our life to actually look like? Is a part of what I see to be kind of that motivational reminder to help people get out of that vicious cycle we're talking about.
I love it. It just makes so much sense. And I think that when you're working with your clients and you can help them to clarify that for their lives personally and professionally, it just opens up Pandora's box of opportunity. So I really think that is so key. If if someone is listening to this thinking, how can you help me to, get unstuck or clarify or go to the next level? What's the best way they can learn more and then reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, so definitely go to my website, femmeetsfortune.com. On that website, you will see that I do have a quiz. I call it the Clarity Quiz. The Clarity Quiz is really designed it's just a quick online quiz that you can take to get a sense of the top areas that you should probably put the most important part of your focus and time to, because of this whole balls in the air, vicious cycle, that sort of thing. So part of getting out of the vicious cycle really is also understanding what is truly the number one area you need to focus on in your work from a data perspective, right? Not from a guest perspective. So the Clarity Quiz helps bring some awareness to that. So you can find that on my Femme Meets Fortune website as well.
Awesome. Well, Diane, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
You too, Mike. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.